Alrighty, students, today is Thursday the 16th. Yep, Thursday the 16th. And we left off yesterday talking about depression. Today we're going to talk about coping mechanisms and suicide. So the first thing I want to cover is obviously coping mechanisms. What are things that we can do to healthfully deal with depression? Number one, talking with family and friends. Sometimes you have to talk about your feelings, and you have to let people know why you feel the way that you feel. And this can help you with your depression. It lets others understand where you're coming from. It might help them understand and be better able to help you. If we don't understand how you're feeling, there's no way that anybody else can help you. It also lets you know that there are people there that care about you. If your friends and family care about you, they'll listen to you and they'll try to help you the best they can. And that's one reason why this is a great coping mechanism. Make sure you're talking to the right people, though. There are definitely, you probably have some friends out there, especially at middle school, where people make fun of you. It might not be the best time to go to those people. And we often make mistakes. And if somebody's coming to you with problems, you shouldn't be joking around with your buddy and making fun of them, because that's only going to make him feel worse. So even amongst these, even if you have a good friendship with a friend and you constantly make fun of them and you make fun of each other and that's just how you guys are, that wouldn't be a great time to do that, okay? Other things, thinking beyond the sadness. One reason that people stay in depression is they constantly think about the thing that makes them depressed. And it's really hard to say, hey, don't think about being sad. Mr. Brando's not that ignorant. This is just a strategy that has worked for some people. Thinking about other things that, what happens when the depression's over? What are you going to do later? Something other than what's obviously making you depressed. Take your thoughts elsewhere if possible. Practice healthy eating and exercise. If you eat healthy and you exercise, you feel confident about yourself. Like I said, when I take the little 8th graders or some of my 8th grade students up to the weight room for the first time because of football season, and you guys start lifting, the first thing they do is they go in the mirror and they start flexing in the mirror. Why? They feel good about themselves. They think that they're actually getting bigger in that exact moment. Exercise develops self-confidence. All right? So it's a great thing to go ahead and exercise. That's going to build your self-esteem, your self-confidence, and you might have some positive effects on the body, which is only going to help you become more self-confident. Healthy eating. If you're eating healthy and your body has the right nutrients, it's going to help develop the brain and other things. When people don't eat right, it affects the brain, all right? You need to eat enough food to fuel the brain. If you're not eating enough fuel, or if you don't have enough fuel for the brain, it's going to start having negative effects. And one of those negative effects could be depression, fatigue, tiredness, things that will lead to more depression, okay? Stress management techniques. Take a deep breath in, take a deep breath out. Whatever you do to manage your stress, it might be artwork. Maybe you play an hour of video games. Not 10 hours of video games, but an hour of video games. All right, stuff that you do to manage your stress. Like when I get stressed out, I might just cook something. It doesn't happen very often. But however you manage your stress, you need to practice something like that. Okay? Avoiding alcohol. That should not be a problem at your age, but when you get older, people, sometimes they get sad and they decide to drink. This does not make a problem better. Why am I telling you this? Well, why do most people do this? Well, if you listen to country music or any other type of music, oftentimes when they talk about being sad and depressed, one of the things they say in their songs is that they go out and drink. And that's telling other people, well, maybe I should do that. No. That's another way to make your depression even worse. So when people get older, or we're not going to ignore the problem, like when people are at parties or something, if they're feeling depressed, especially maybe a high school kid that's very vulnerable, they might resort to drugs and alcohol. You do not want to do that when you're depressed. It will only make it worse. So you want to avoid that. Avoid putting yourself in those situations. Okay? 6, develop resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back and the ability to keep pushing forward despite hard things. I'll tell you, I had a friend who was depressed in college. When he was depressed, he locked himself in his room and he did not come out and he did not go to class. When he didn't go to class, his grades kept going down, so that made his depression worse. Now, there are all those days that we sometimes just have to take a day off. We just can't deal with anything in the day. But you have to have the ability at some point to say, I have to go out and do the next thing, and I have to keep pushing forward. Because if you don't, the problem will only get worse. And this young man had to drop out of college because at points in times his depression was too bad and he never ever got out of it. It's really important that you learn to push through the tough things, because at some point in time you might have to do it. And that's just what develop resilience means. 7, seek treatment if strategies are not working. If none of this is working, you need help beyond what you can provide yourself. You might have to, talk to a guidance counselor, somebody with a little bit more knowledge. You might have a brain deficiency where you're not producing the right chemicals, so you might have to be on medication. There's a lot of things here that it's a very complicated issue that we can't just say, oh, I'll figure it out on my own. It's okay to get help when things aren't working, and you should feel comfortable getting help, which is why we need to talk to responsible adults and friends, okay? The next thing, with depression, and extreme depression can often lead to suicide. We got to talk about suicide because it is an issue that affects thoughts of suicide may affect everybody. And let's talk about the tendencies. These are behaviors or personality traits that people have that tend to be suicidal personality traits. People that have these personality traits tend to commit suicide at a higher rate than those who don't. People who are hyper-aggressive, super angry, always fighting other people, those people tend to commit suicide at a higher rate than other people. Why? Well, they're usually overly aggressive towards other people because something is affecting them in their life, and they're trying to make up for it in aggressive behavior. Don't want to go into more detail because we're not together and it's really hard to explain. 2, perfectionistic behavior. Why is the perfectionist more likely to commit suicide than other people? Because if nothing is ever good enough, they're not ever going to feel good enough. So they get a 98% A, but they wanted 100. 98's not good enough. What are they doing? They're tearing themselves down. They're decreasing their own self-confidence and their own self-worth because they got an A, but it wasn't a high enough A. And that happens with anything that the perfectionist tries to do. If this isn't perfect enough, they're going to feel terrible about it and tear themselves down. That's why they're more likely to have a higher rate of suicide. 3, feelings of hopelessness. If somebody constantly feels hopeless, like there's no hope, that is a sign of suicide, all right, or a tendency of suicide. People with low self-esteem. If you have low self-esteem, this is something that you may be more likely to commit suicide, or people are more likely to commit suicide because they have self-esteem. They don't feel confident about themselves. They don't feel anything about them is worth it. These are things that we have to resolve. Inadequate social skills. People who don't, the introverted people who aren't able to go out, able to conversate with people, who want to have conversations, but they just don't have the social skills to have them, they feel alienated from everybody else, which tends to lead to a higher rate of suicide. Mental disorders, those with certain mental disorders like an anxiety disorder or something are more likely to commit suicide. And hidden anger, people who try to hide their anger and they're angry on the inside but they never show their emotions, they just bottle it up. These are the 7 tendencies or the 7 personality types of people who are more likely to commit suicide. More importantly, let's talk about the signs. These are things that people say or do, and if you see these things, because it's a lot easier to see than the first 7 I just gave you, if you see these things, you need to go get somebody help. If you see your friends having this, you should tell a guidance counselor, hey, I've seen so-and-so and they're saying these kinds of things and I'm worried about them. That's not betraying anybody's trust. People say these things before suicide tends to happen. And number 1, they talk about killing themselves, like making comments such as, I wish I was never born. When somebody says, man, I wish I was dead. Now, we're not talking about somebody who drops their Chipotle in the parking lot, stares down at a plate, and they're like, man, I wish I died. Obviously, they're kidding. But we're talking about somebody who comes to school every day or is in public or outside with your friends, and they're talking about dying all the time. Like, man, I wish I was dead. That is a huge red flag, and that's something that you should tell the guidance counselor because those are things that we need to talk about. We need to make sure that people don't feel that way. All right? 2, making indirect statements about killing themselves. These are things that are like people talk about, where do you think I can find something to harm myself? Do you think it'd be easy or hard? When they talk about how they're going to die, that's a big, big red flag. Or if they're questioning whether you think it'd be painful or not, those are huge red flags, and we have to go get kids the help they need, and you need to go to a guidance counselor and tell them. And you're going to hear me say that about 50 times during this lecture because it's really important. Change in personality. Let's imagine somebody's always happy and bubbly like Mr. Durando is when he walks into class. If I came in, put my head down, and been all mopey, that's a change in personality. When there's a sudden change in personality, that's a red flag. You should be concerned for that person. Withdrawal from friends and family. They start pushing everybody away. They don't want to be around anybody. Big red flag. Social isolation is a sign of depression and suicide. So if somebody starts pushing everybody away, that's something that we need to consider, and we need to get the person help. Losing interest in appearance. They stop taking care of their hair. They don't take care of themselves. They stop wearing deodorant. They've given up on themselves. This is a sign of suicide also. Preoccupied with death and dying. Somebody who talks about death and dying all the time and really considers death and dying is somebody who is might be considering suicide. That's a big red flag. So if somebody's talking about death and dying all the time, that's a big red flag. Constant headaches and stomach aches. If the mind does not feel well and it's questioning itself, and like people who are in a depression, they're going to constantly have headaches and stomach aches. I don't feel good. Why? Because their mind is beating them up. They're beating themselves up. And one of the consequences of beating yourself up is eventually people start to have these headaches and stomach aches. Drug use and misuse. They start to misuse drugs. Like it says take 2 and they take 6. This is a big, big red flag. When somebody starts doing this, you have to really go get them help. Talking about getting even with others, okay? Like they want to get even with other people. Big red flag. Big, big red flag. Failing to recover from a disappointment or loss. Somebody had something terrible happen where they lost somebody or they lost something that was really important. They're going to go into a little bit of depression, but if they stay down there and they're not able to bring themselves back up, they might be in a state where they're more likely to commit suicide, and that's when we have to help them. Obviously, people are going to be depressed when something terrible happens. If they stay there, though, that is an issue, and that's when we have to find a way to help these individuals. Running away, okay, simple. Talking about those who have committed suicide. Usually suicide rates are higher after somebody has committed suicide. It's really important when these things kind of happen that we remember those people, but we got to take it upon ourselves that if somebody considers and keeps talking about this, that we go out and help them and get them the help that they need. So, I got about 2 minutes left, and this is where Mr. Durando is actually going to tell you something that has happened with one of his very close friends when he was in college, how he saw about 7 of these. There's a young man that I went to college with. He was very suicidal at one point in time. A bunch of the signs and symptoms happened. He was talking about death and dying. And then there was one day when I was there, and he had Advil, and he was mistaking Advil, just an over-the-counter drug. It said take 2, and he did something that we had to take him to the hospital for. He took a whole bottle. And he had stomach aches, headaches. He was talking about death and dying. He would write about it all the time in his notebook. If we didn't get that young man help on that day, there could have been some very serious consequences. It's really important that you get people help. I didn't try to sit there and talk him through it, not because I didn't want to, because I know I'm not the best person. I know that there's somebody who's way better than me out there who can do it. And kids, you may feel like you're betraying your friend's trust. Like, I thought I could trust you guys, and something like that along those lines. When I tell you that you actually are helping them more than you are hurting them, believe me. This guy felt that I betrayed his trust at that point in time. But it's 100% worth it when he came out okay. He ended up getting a college degree. He ended up finishing college. He ended up getting the help he needed. Help that I couldn't give him. When you are with your friends, if you see something like this, you have to be the one sometimes to go out and tell other people that can help them. Because you are not able to help them enough. And you may feel that you are, and certainly there are times when I thought I could have helped, but there are better people to do it than me. And admitting that is going to help more people. This is a really heavy topic to talk about. If you have any questions, please email me. That concludes today. No work, please just get caught up on all your work. I have about 15 students that are a little bit behind, and I want you guys to catch up. So you have today, tomorrow, and everything to catch up. When we pick up tomorrow, Monday, when we pick up Monday, we'll be talking about how to cope with loss and grieving. Okay? Have a wonderful weekend.